TESOL Pop, Season 5, Episode 10. Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. My name is Laura, and joining me today to talk about building your personal brand on LinkedIn is Gina Rodriguez. Gina is an ELT marketing and education consultant helping language service teams learn about social media, marketing, sales strategy, and course innovation to build their brand awareness and grow their businesses. She offers training, professional talks, tailored strategies, and of course, consultancy. She's passionate about quality education, innovative teaching tools, and has an interest in supporting parents through effective school communication. Gina, a very warm welcome to the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here to my first podcast.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about personal branding for teachers and the benefits of building a personal brand on a social media platform like LinkedIn. We're also going to focus on 3 steps to help you set up your LinkedIn profile and use this platform to reflect your brand. As with many TESOL Pop episodes, today's topic is relevant to many teaching contexts, whether you teach in a school or work as a freelance educator. In addition, while we're focusing on LinkedIn as our platform of choice today, the ideas and steps in this episode can be adapted to other platforms such as Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. A good place to start then would be to define what personal branding is. Gina, could you tell us what it means in your own words?
Sure, that's a very good question. Well, a personal brand is the widely recognized perception or impression that people have about a person based on their experience, their expertise, and their competencies. Normally, when we talk about a brand, in general, people tend to think of big companies. But nowadays, the term branding is also applicable to all businesses, not only big ones, but it could be small, medium language schools, and also self-employed professionals. I think it was Bezos that said that it is what, branding is what people say when you're not in the room. So it's that perception that people have about you.
In today's episode, we mentioned LinkedIn as our platform of choice. And of course, there is a community of teachers that are present on LinkedIn, but some of our listeners may not use it or engage in using a platform like this as frequently as others, or not at all. Could you tell us, how can a social media platform like this one help teachers?
LinkedIn is one of those platforms that is usually associated to businesses and corporate. However, it is used by the ELT community, but especially the majority of the people there are decision makers. So what does that mean for teachers? It means that if they are present in the platform, they will be in front of the eyes of publishers and stakeholders, examination boards, but also sometimes even parents, okay, that populate the platform. It's a professional platform. People are there because they want to learn about industry news, they want to see what's trending and what's happening, and it's very important for teachers to know how to be there, because it's a different place from, for example, Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, just to mention a few.
When you're building a personal brand on a platform like LinkedIn, where on earth should we start? What would be the first step?
The moment you start your account on LinkedIn, you need to look at some details, especially the profile. So, for example, the photo, the banner, the summary, the feature section. It's very important that you have a photo, and it is a professional photo, so it's not a photo of yourself on the beach, for example. Okay. And the banner, which is the piece that is behind your photo, it's an extra space that you can use to, for example, say what you do. So you have like a little claim that represents you somehow. There is a connection. If you're a language teacher, there is a connection to your job and to your sector. When you use LinkedIn, every time you make a comment or you share a post, you see that there's your name, and underneath there's a piece of information like your title, tagline, right? And that is so important, because in that space, it needs to be clear who you are, what you do, and who you help. The first, I think it's 70 characters are visible every time you comment. So again, as I said, it has to be clear what you do, who you help. And the next thing is the summary. So the summary gives you a little bit of more space, and it's not visible when you are online, and in the sense that when you're commenting. But if someone sees you and sees information, someone might be interested in learning a bit more about this person. They go and check your profile, they will go to your summary. So that's where you need to have all your information, like what you do in more detail, but using what is called the upside pyramid. So with the most important information at the top, and then you go down, because people are always in a hurry. If they don't get hooked by the first line, then probably they will move on, or they're not going to continue to read. So start with the most important information first, and then go down, and then invite people to connect with you, or to check your website if you have one, or listen to your podcast, as in your case.
It can be quite tricky, can't it, to think of all these things if you're just starting out. But I find that by talking to colleagues and friends about where my strengths are, that helps me to identify what I do and what I do well, in formulating like the tagline that you mentioned and thinking about what I should post. If listeners are maybe thinking, oh, I'm not too sure what to write, it can be something that you can evolve through conversations. And with my LinkedIn, maybe it's the same with yours, Gina. Mine's evolved quite a lot over the past year, because
Mine too. Yeah.
you can change it. You can change it. It's fine. If you haven't quite got the text right, or you feel like, you know what, that's not quite snappy enough, or that's not really driving the point, you can get feedback from your colleagues and friends on this, and then you can always just change it. I think it's important just to get started and just have a go first, and it will evolve through the editorial process.
Absolutely. My profile has changed over the years so many times, because, as you said, at the beginning, maybe you're not quite sure. Maybe you change your sector. Maybe you have a new passion. And even when you know exactly what you're doing, and you're kind of stable, I do recommend checking your profile, like at least minimum once a year, and see, okay, if there's something you need to tweak a little bit.
You mentioned earlier posting, and I think that's a good step for us to move on to once we've got the profile set up and thinking about what we can post, because sometimes it can be quite intimidating to know what to put out there in the ether of a platform that as vast as LinkedIn. What tips do you have on posting content specifically, and to kind of start generating conversations about, your passions and values?
You have to think of social networks as social. I mean, they are social, and they're like social events. So imagine that you work for a school. There's the meeting, the teachers' meeting, okay, where you will talk about the methodologies, the latest methodologies, so that's professional, and that's your LinkedIn. And then you leave the room, and then you go to have a coffee all together, and maybe talk about the restaurant that you went yesterday, and show the pictures about your last trip. That's probably your Instagram.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, and then you leave the school, and you bump into your cousin and you start talking about family. That's your Facebook. And then you go into your house and start jumping on the sofa. That's your TikTok, for example. Dancing in the living room. So you see, and whereas you will be wearing pajamas in the living room, and you're not going to be wearing pajamas in that teachers meeting. So people need to understand that there's an etiquette out there that needs to be respected. If you look at personal branding, because you want to leave that impression on the people that are following you or networking with you on the social network, your content has to bring value. How do you plan that? I mean, first, you need to plan it in the same way you plan your lessons. So you sit down and think, what is your message? Once you have those kind of main messages for your communication, then you're going to think about pillars for each one. You think, for example, if you teach adults that work in companies, maybe one of the message is reskilling and upskilling, for example. Okay, and underneath you will have subtopics about that. So you have to divide that, and then you start thinking what you're going to, and thinking also about what people ask you about a lot. So all those questions that you get from colleagues, from other, from parents, from students. So if they're asking you things, and you can help them, then also that's part of your communication on the platform as well.
So up until this point, we've talked about creating your profile, tending to it every year to make sure it is relevant, remains up to date with what your values and where you're going in your career. And you talked about posting content as well and thinking about what type of content to post. Can we move on to like the third stage about interacting with others? Because it is a social media site, so we have to be social, right?
Absolutely.
What tips do you have in handling that?
First thing is to start conversations or move conversations onwards. Okay, so it's not just about being observing. Like some people, for example, they create a profile and they state they're quiet observing. If you're there because you want to benefit from your network and bring value to your network, so the best thing to do is to start conversations. So you can do that by, for example, checking what people are posting, or you can even click on the little bell on someone's profile. So if there's someone that maybe, let's imagine there's an author or a writer that is there in your network, and you don't want to miss what they're saying, so you click on that icon, and then when they post, you will see the post immediately, a notification, and you go and comments. It's not just like great, well done, congrats, or something kind of superficial. Otherwise, the comment will, if it sounds too robotic, people will start doubting even more now. Ask a question, add something, link another resource, and that will help the conversation move on. And I would recommend, if you want to grow your network, for example, to spend some time, like 10-15 minutes, sit down and go through and see what's happening, and imagine that it's like, again, going into that teacher's room and say hello to people, the news of the day that you have, that kind of thing, being social, really.
Thank you so much, Gina, for sharing all this expertise and encouraging us to curate our personal branding on a platform like LinkedIn. It's been a really insightful conversation, so thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for inviting me, and I hope it's useful.
So if you're thinking about building your personal brand, then Gina and I would like to challenge you to share this podcast on your LinkedIn and tag us. You can tag TESOL Pop and, of course, Gina Rodriguez on LinkedIn and share your thoughts on the episode. That can be your first post if you're looking for inspiration. To learn more about using LinkedIn and, of course, other social networks, then go and check out Gina's website at grschoolmarketing.com. And also she's on Instagram at Gina_ELT_consultant. Of course, as always, those links are in the show notes and on the TESOL Pop website, so you can find them easily. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer, or indeed a topic like Gina did to pitch for a podcast, then you can contact us via Instagram, Facebook, or the website tesolpop.com. Finally, you can support the work we do at TESOL Pop by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also share our content with your teaching community, or you can even go and sponsor one of our coffee breaks at ko-fi.com/TESOL Pop.